Hello, I am Mark Urrutia, the Regional Director for the Minority Business Assistance Center, which is housed and sponsored by the University of Toledo. Today, we're going to be talking about the MBAC, the Minority Business Assistance Center, and the SBA's assistance programs for small businesses, primarily talking about the PPP program. So the Minority Business Assistance Center is a state of Ohio program that operates throughout the 88 counties of the state of Ohio. The Toledo region covers 17 counties in Northwest Ohio, including Sandusky County and Fremont. Today, we'll be talking about a lot of SBA stuff, and it's going to be very high level. A little bit more about the center. We're a regional center, and we really focus on innovative and inquisitive minority businesses and entrepreneurial development throughout our 17 county area. We're determined to be supportive and impactful in the delivery of wraparound entrepreneurial services and community engagement. So our role really is to help with one-on-one business advising and coaching for small, minority, and underserved businesses in the area. The other thing that we do is a series of workshops, and outside of COVID, most of those are in person, but with the new normal, of course, we're doing many things virtually, like today's presentation. The 2021 COVID-19 Economic Aid Overview. So this is presented on behalf of the SBA and really is going to be taking place where we're looking at what's happening today. But as we know, in the changing environment, things change quite often. So I'm going to refer you several times today to make sure you look at sba.gov for all of the programs and click under the COVID-19 Small Business Relief Programs or the sba.gov/PPP, specifically about the Payroll Protection Program. So what we're going to talk about today is where we are in the process, the different funding options available. There's one that's not even on the screen that I'll just mention, the actual details of the PPP program, additional resources, and then I'll reiterate the website from SBA for PPP. So as we know, the United States and really the world have really been hit hard from COVID-19, in particular, small businesses. And ones we work with primarily are underserved segments, including women, minority, and veterans. The SBA is committed to really making sure there are programs that deliver these critical economic aid to America's small businesses and other eligible entities like nonprofits, and we'll talk about those. So the programs we're going to talk briefly about, very high level, are the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP as I'll refer to it. It's a loan program, but it is forgivable. We'll talk about that. The SBA, even prior to the pandemic, has had numerous amount of small business programs, including the 7A program, 504, many programs. Many of those have deferred payments. It's important that you work with the SBA on those. We're not really going to talk about those today. The EDIL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is both a loan and a grant. The first one is the actual loan, and then they had an advance, which is now a grant, and it was up to $10,000. We'll talk a little bit about that. And the second to newest program is the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. That's new just this week. Check with sba.gov and they'll talk more about that. The other one that's not really out yet, it's in process with SBA, is the Restaurant Revitalization Grant, specifically, obviously targeted toward restaurants. There'll be more direction on that at sba.gov. So the PPP Loan Program, it's really participating partner institutions. Typically, it's going to be banks and other financial institutions. We'll talk about where to find those. It is approved by your bank, the program, and double checked by the SBA and backed by the SBA. Typically, it's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll from either 2019 or 2020. You select maximum of $10 million per small business. It is unsecured. There's no personal guarantee involved with this. The interest rate on the loan is 1%. It's a 5-year term, and it's a 10-month deferral process. Now, what is covered is, and we'll talk more specifically about this, is it's designed for payroll, right? PPP, Payroll Protection Program. At least 60% has to be for payroll, but other categories include rent, utilities, interest, and there's other new categories. Now, this loan is designed to be forgivable. So if you do everything right, up to 100% is forgiven of this loan, or it could be. So we're going to also talk about first draw and second draw. There's a lot of confusion on that. Really what you need to know is if you already have been approved on this PPP loan, that's your first draw. If you're eligible, some businesses are eligible to get a second draw. That's the second draw. And we'll talk about those distinctions as we go through. So it's for additional types of businesses as well. That's one of the changes. And expanded eligible expenses. So we'll talk about that. The PPP loan proceeds, the period of time, which is called a covered period, is anywhere from 8 to 24 weeks. You actually decide. It could be 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, up to 24 weeks. And there could be strategies that you could use that would best suit your business. And you can talk with your banker more specifically about that. Certain borrowers may be able to increase their original PPP loan amount. So for those who got a first draw, there could be some circumstances why you would be able to increase that. Again, talk with your financial institution. You must apply according to the law on or before May 31st, 2021, through your financial institution. Then they will be able to get that to the SBA. They do their work, and they have until the end of June to get that back to the bank. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been hearing lots of things recently, both from my banker and a couple other people, that because of the expansion of this program, there might be limitation on funds. So we recommend that you apply soon on this. Again, talk with your banker. The other thing is, even though you need to apply on or before the 31st, May 31st, according to the law, some banks might cut off before that just to make sure they get everything through. You would use SBA Form 2483, and you want to make sure you look for the most current version on the website. Again, your financial institution will be able to help you through this. It's a good idea, though, for you to go on as a business person first to look at that. So the first draw, loan eligibility, must comply with the size standards. Typically, that's going to be 300 or less, but it depends on the type of business. On the SBA site, that'll help you. They're newly eligible businesses, and those are housing cooperatives, marketing organizations like destination marketing organizations, 501c6s like chambers of commerce, and eligible news organizations. Still, the other businesses still are eligible for that. Those are just the new ones. So sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed, other business entities like partnerships, corporations, S Corp, C Corps, 501c3 nonprofit organization, veterans organizations, and tribal businesses are all still eligible. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the second draw. And again, if you haven't applied for the PPP yet, then you're in first draw, and these don't apply. If you applied already and got one, and you're eligible, and we'll talk about the eligibility to apply for the second draw, these are some of the changes. So if you previously received a PPP loan, you could be eligible for a second draw. You have to have 300 employees or less and suffered at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts. We'll talk about that more specifically. For most borrowers, the maximum loan amount in the second draw is 2.5% of your average monthly payroll cost in either 2019 or 2020. You select, and that's up to $2 million. There's other limitations in the calculation. Your banker will help you through that. For borrowers in a certain industry in NAICS code 72, which would be accommodation and food services sectors like restaurants is the biggest grouping there, the maximum loan amount for the second draw is 3.5 times your average monthly payroll cost in either 2019 or 2020, up to $2 million still. But again, it allows for that industry to have a little bit more because they were hardest hit. The second draw PPP loan applications must be submitted on a different form, and it's the 2483 SD second draw. And your lender should be able to help you with this. So the second draw loan eligibility, again, you must have applied for the first PPP, and your covered periods cannot overlap. So if you had 24 months the first time on weeks, 24 weeks, your second draw can't start before week 25. So that's really important. Again, your banker can help you through that. You have to have used or will use your first draw PPP loan amount before the second draw is distributed. Now, here's something that I wasn't aware of. I thought you had to wait to apply for the second draw till you're done with your first draw. I was told by a banker, no, you can apply, the money just can't be distributed until the second. So work with your banker on that, they'll help you. The reason why this is important is because you really want to apply first draw or second draw as soon as possible so they can get the paperwork through. But again, if you're on second draw, the loan would not be distributed till after the first draw period. So you have to have less than 300 employees. And the other thing is, to be eligible for the second draw, you have to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters of 19 and 20. So what you do, first quarter is January, February, March. You look at 2019, what your gross receipts were in 2019 in those 3 months, first quarter, compared to 2020. If you had at least 25% less in 2020, comparable January, February, March, then you would qualify. That meets that third standard there. If it's not the first quarter, look at your second quarter. If your second quarter is not 25, look for your third and fourth. If none of them are, you're not going to be eligible for a second draw. And it has to be comparable quarters. So January, February, March compared to January, February, March of 2020. So seasonal employees, there is a separate calculation. So if you have a seasonal business, but you operate no more than 7 months per year, or 6 months of revenue is not more than 1/3 of the remaining 6 months. So if it's seasonal or really you have a heavy season in a certain period, again, your banker can help you out with this. So let's talk about the process. So the process is you have to find a lender first. This isn't an SBA per se, you apply to a lender. So it could be a bank or other financial institution. Typically what's recommended is you're gonna talk with the bank that you already do business with. If they're an SBA approved bank and participate in this program, they could help you through. The reason why that would be probably an easier process is they already know who you are, they already have some documents, so it should be an easier process. But if your bank does not, they might recommend someone, or what I would do is go to sba.gov/lender match, and you can put in a zip code or different criteria and find a lender. There are a lot, I would hesitate to looking on the internet. Sometimes some of those, well, we all know what happens out there. So you want to make sure they're an approved lender through SBA. The second process is completing the application. Now that includes all supporting documentation. So that might be depending on your business formation, but like for a sole proprietor, single member LLC, those categories, it's going to be like your Schedule C. It might be a bank statement or a number of bank statements. If you're in an organization, it might be 1099 income statements. If you're not going through your typical bank, they might require proof of identity. So it might be a state approved ID or driver's license, but some of those documents. Now, your bank will help you, your financial institution will help you through that process and let you know what you need. There's also some guidance on the SBA website. Then the third step is actually the SBA issues a loan number. So what happens is the financial institutions will take all the information, make sure it makes sense to them, it meets all the requirements. Once now they may come back to you and say, hey, we need this, or this is not clear, can you explain this? Then once they're confident of that, they'll send it to the SBA. The SBA checks certain things. They'll do some double checks. They'll make sure everything's in line. They'll communicate with the bank that it's okay. And then the bank will be the one that issues the loan to you. I would pay attention to your email that you put on there. Make sure you take your time on the application to make sure everything's spelled right, a good phone number for you, because that's how they're going to communicate, mostly through email. If you have any questions, work with your bank. Some financial institutions do an online process, some do in person. Work with them, whatever their process is. Again, the green on the bottom, May 31st is when you have the deadline to apply, or until funding is exhausted. Been hearing a lot of things about financial institutions, SBA approving a lot of higher amounts. So it's really important you would move on this kind of quickly. At least that's my recommendation. We'll talk a little bit about forgiveness, which is after the process. Again, you would interact with your bank on this. But for this to be a forgivable loan, there's a few changes. So an update through the Economic Aid Act was the EDIL loans, the EDIL advances are no longer deductible from PPP forgiveness payments. If you didn't have an EDIL advance, don't worry about it. You would know if you did. That's the initially $1,000 to $10,000 advance, which turned out to be a grant. Expenses paid with PPP loans are federally tax deductible. Now consult the IRS or your tax professional for further guidance on this, but that was a change. Expandable forgiveness expenses are permissible, and we'll talk about that. The other new thing is They've got a lot of these forgivable loans out there, and it's going to be very time consuming to go through all the paperwork on the forgivable side. So if your loan is 150,000 or less, it's going to be a really simple process. I believe it's a 2-page verification, fill in some figures and sign off, and that's the verification. Now, I would have all the documentation that backs that up in case they come back to you, but it's a much more simplified process. And per the CARES Act, forgivable PPP loans are not federally taxable income. So that's another great change for small business. A few things about the eligible expenses. Again, you want this to be forgivable, and that's the intent of the law. Now, 60% at least has to be on payroll costs. So those are listed there: wages, salaries, commissions, employee benefits, state and local taxes, that category. For our smallest of businesses, you just have to pay yourself at least 60% of that and show proof of that. Maybe write yourself a check and then put it in a personal account. Those are examples of how to do that. Now, the non-payroll costs, not more than 40% of your total loan, could be under interest on mortgages, rents, utility costs, covered operating expenses. And there's some examples, and those have expanded. Software, internet stuff. The next bullet is covered property damages. Typically, that's vandalism and looting. That's not covered by insurance. Supplier costs, important items for operations, and worker protection expenditures like PPE, those kind of things. Now, it needs to at least be 60% for payroll. It could be 100%. Is 100% more than 60? Yes. Is 75 more than 60? Yes. So at least it needs to at least be 60. Some businesses I work with, they're just doing 100% for payroll, and that meets the criteria. Additional resources, contact your lender. As I said many times, if you don't have a lender, check that matchmaker site on SBA.gov. The PPP is really, that site is an awesome place. There's also your local Chamber of Commerce can provide help. The Minority Business Assistance Centers throughout Ohio, SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers, can help throughout this process as well. There's 2 SBA district offices in Ohio, Cleveland for the northern part of the state and Columbus for mid and south. So those are available as well. And then I wanted to point out the resource site, again, sba.gov/PPP. The 2 forms, the SD is the second draw. There's some great overviews, the frequently asked questions. It's a PDF that's well done. There's also help in calculating your first draw and second draw. There could be different calculations there. And any updates or changes are on that site. So work with your banker. Usually they're pretty up to date, as well as the site. This is our contact information at the Minority Business Assistance Center. Again, we're partnering with the Fremont, Sandusky County Chamber of Commerce and the city of Fremont to bring resources to the area. We're hosted at the Minority Business Development Center, which is an incubator at the University of Toledo. 419-530-MBAC 6222, our email, or you can Google us at MBAC Toledo, and that's our website. So we would encourage you to engage. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to help you. Again, your banker is going to be a great resource. The other thing I would say is please don't wait. When I found out the money was kind of getting tighter, I applied for a second draw right away, actually yesterday. So please make sure you do that. Your financial institution will be able to help out. Another good resource we have in Ohio So if your bank doesn't offer it, or maybe doesn't do, what you need, ECDI is a nonprofit financial institution that many of the banks in Ohio support. They have an online process that we utilize quite a bit for a bunch of our clients. They do a really nice job. So that would be another resource. So I really encourage you to do this, ask any questions, and again, we'd be happy to help. Thank you.